go ahead and start recording this session. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and start to share my screen. Okay, and that is all right. That's not the screen that I wanted to share. So we will just a moment while I share the screen that I actually did want to share. Okay. All right. And there it is. All right. So, um, great. Okay, so for those of you that are just joining, thank you guys so much for attending my webinar today, and welcome to my presentation on continuing the conversation, giving students a voice with podcasting. And so this is really a topic that's really near and dear to me because before I moved to Germany, I learned some of my very first German words through podcasts. And so today we're particularly going to be focusing on using Anchor FM. On putting together a podcast on Anchor FM. All right, so for those of you who don't know me, just a little bit about me. So my specialization is in academic and business English, and my research interests are in phrasal verb acquisition, call and maul, so computer-assisted language learning and mobile-assisted language learning, as well as anything having to do with grammar instruction methodology, because grammar is one of my favorite subjects to actually teach. Okay, so the wonderful flags that you see there at the bottom are the various countries that I have had the wonderful opportunity to teach and live in. And so we have Japan, Turkey, we have Germany, Spain, and of course the US. And right below my picture there, you can see some of the universities here in the US, in New York, where I have been able to teach. Okay, so just to give you a little idea of what the flow of the presentation will be like. So that little Bitmoji, it was inspired by Laura's presentation yesterday about Bitmojis. And I said, what if I can put a little dancing Bitmoji there? So that is supposed to represent the flow of today's presentation. So I'm going to talk about pedagogy for podcasting, a little bit on past and some present thoughts on that. Then I'm going to discuss some of my project ideas for podcasting. I'm going to take you guys into the Anchor app to see how to put together a podcast on Anchor, as well as let you listen to a student interview sample. I'll provide some resource links, and then there will be time for questions and comments towards the end. Now, I do definitely like to keep my presentations rather interactive, and so I will definitely be asking you guys some questions throughout the webinar. Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look at the first poll. I'm going to go ahead and launch the very first poll. Okay. So I have launched it. Okay, I will give you guys a few moments to start responding. So have you used podcasts in your classroom as a supplement to any of your lessons? All right, so if so, it would be great if you could list some of those in the chat. It would be great if you have, if you could list some of those in the chat. Okay, so let me take a look here and see. Okay, listening exercise, unpleasant design. Okay, great. From BBC, very nice. All right, great. Okay. Someone is, Renee is talking about podcast creation. Okay. All right. This is really great because this is mainly what we'll be talking about here today. All right. So some of you have never used them. Okay, great. So hopefully this will inspire you to go ahead and use them today. That would be really great. Okay. Very nice. And so yeah, I'm gonna give a few people maybe just a couple more moments to reply. 80% of you guys have replied, okay. And then I'll go ahead and share the results of this poll. Okay, all right. Okay, just a few more moments. Okay, those of you who have not responded, if you could go ahead and respond, please. That would be great. Okay. All right. And let's see. I'm going to go ahead and check the chat and see if there's anything else. Oh, okay. So some of you guys, some of you listen. Okay. But you've never used it with students. All right. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So very nice. So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. Okay. And to go ahead and show you guys the results. Okay. So as you can see, a lot of our audience members today have not used podcasts in their classroom. So again, hopefully this will motivate you guys to do so. And it was very nice to see, okay, that some of you have been using it. And one of you even mentioned doing some type of a production with your class. So that's excellent. Okay. All right, so then we're going to go ahead and continue. All right, so let's just go ahead and start with some thoughts on podcasting, some past thoughts on podcasting. So a review of the literature basically states that during the early attempts to adopt podcasting as an educational tool, that students perceived them rather negatively. And it was really determined that this was probably due to a lack of pedagogical design. So as most of us already know, before diving into any particular technological tool, the first thing that we should do is determine our instructional goals. So with that in mind, has anyone heard of this term TPAC? TPAC. So just a quick yes or no in the chat if you have heard of TPAC. Quick yes or no in the chat. Let me take a look here. Okay. So far, no. All right. This term TPAC. Anyone heard of that? All right. Okay. So far, no. Majority have not heard of this. Okay. All right. Great. So then what on earth is it? What is TPAC? Okay, so it is basically technological, pedagogical content knowledge. And what is that? So, I mean, really, what does that mean? Well, basically, it is a teaching framework that was designed by Kohler and Mishra. And it's basically to remind teachers that really they should definitely consider the appropriateness of materials and classroom tasks as suited to their students' needs. So of course, when we're talking about the technological knowledge, in this case, we are talking about how to access and really make efficient use and effective use of podcasts as a tool. Now with TPAC in mind, the purpose of this next part of the presentation is basically to discuss the theories of second language acquisition developed through studies, and then to connect those theories with with podcast pedagogy and podcast practices. So I'm going to go ahead and start with some thoughts on the benefits of podcasting. So basically, Ashton, Hay, and Brooks state that podcasting facilitates self-paced learning as well as gives slower learners a platform for remediation. So, meaning remedying or correcting any types of errors. In addition, Chan and Lee have stated that the use of podcasts also reduces students' anxiety and creates a sense of belonging to a learning community. And now for me, this second statement here is I really like it because it really emphasizes the importance of students having a space of shared creation so that they can really 10x their motivation to learn. And finally, we have McMinn, who stated that when students are challenged to share their podcast with others, they may put forth more effort and attention to detail into them because they know that people other than their teacher will hear the results. And of course, this is really a strong impetus for motivation if you think that your classmates or other people in your school or potentially who knows who could be listening to your podcast depending on how you actually decide to publish it. So definitely it's motivation to put their best foot forward. Okay. All right. So Phillips also discovered some interesting benefits to podcasting in her study in 2015, which is basically that producing podcasts actually leads to the acquisition of a lot of transferable skills. So these transferable skills are researching, analyzing and organizing information, and also drafting and editing a script. So all of these things are, they are definitely transferable skills that students can use outside of a classroom context. Okay, and so finally, to move this more to a higher education or connect this more to a higher education context, Salmon and Nee have stated that the use of podcasts in tertiary education is considered to promote motivation and engagement, cognition and learning, learner autonomy, and innovative opportunities for teaching and presenting. Now, Salmon and Nee mentioned this word cognition, and way back in 1990, O'Malley and Shamat talked about cognitive, metacognitive, and socioaffective being three really important types of learning strategies that learners use. So cognitive meaning repetition, organizing new language, using imagery for memorization, and metacognitive meaning students really tapping into and understanding the way that they actually learn. So thinking about their thinking, okay? And then socioaffective, referring to learning through, of course, contact and interaction with others. So if we take a look again at the skill set that is developed through podcasting, these three learning strategies definitely come into play when you are trying to analyze, organize information, and do all of these things, particularly within like a group podcast or even if it's a paired podcast that students are putting together because they need to be able to negotiate and clarify ideas. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to just briefly, because I know we want to get to the meat of Anchor FM, perhaps, but just briefly, I'm going to review some studies, and not all of them are in higher ed context, but nonetheless, they are really relevant to our practices as English language instructors. But before I get into that, of course, I would like you guys to go ahead and take another poll. So I am going to launch a second poll here. All right. And okay, please go ahead and start to respond. So the question here, of course, is, have you used podcasts recently during our current online learning situation? Okay. because while some of you may have used podcasts in the classroom, now that there's distance learning, maybe it might have been a little bit more difficult to wrap your head around exactly how to do that. So I'm wondering who has actually done that. Okay. I'm going to take a look in the chat now, because I see that there are, since we went online. Okay, great. So Claire has used TED Talks. Okay, since we've gone online, that's excellent. All right. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to give you guys a few more minutes to respond here. All right. So far, no one has used podcasts during our online situation, our distance learning situation. Okay, so I'll give people a few more seconds to go ahead and respond to this poll. All right. Okay. So, all right, so about 76% of you guys have responded. So we'll go ahead and go with that. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll there. All right, and we really have an overwhelming no. Okay, so that's actually good, because, I'm hoping that in showing you how to kind of facilitate the use of Anchor FM, maybe you guys might find it a little easier to actually to do this during this current situation. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to some current studies. Okay, so we're going to start with a study in the high school context in Istanbul, Turkey. So the purpose of this particular study was to investigate the effects of podcasts in EFL students' oral performance, as well as their speaking anxiety, and the relationship between their speaking anxiety and oral performance, as well as their perceptions of using podcasts. So I happen to think that it's really important, and something that's sometimes overlooked, to look at students' perceptions of the tech or the activities that are being used in the classroom. I think this is actually very important, because this really ties in with the amount of, or the level of, engagement and therefore improvement that we're going to see from our students. So in addition, for many students, the idea of course, producing a podcast may be entirely new. I mean, they may be used to listening to them as supplements to your other materials in the classrooms, but not really accustomed to putting one together. So this type of novel experience can really spark curiosity, and it can also make learning and practicing English all the more desirable. Just another personal comment. I think that essentially, and especially during this time as educators, I think we hope that by providing students with exposure to a variety of engaging ways to be able to study outside of a classroom setting, that we hope this will encourage intrinsic motivation to improve their language skills. So what was the result of this particular study? Well, it showed that students who created podcasts, in addition to following the speaking activities in their course book, not only had higher oral performance and lower speaking anxiety, but believed that podcasts helped them feel more confident, improve their oral performances and pronunciation, and also expand their vocabulary. So let's move on now to an English Language Institute context in Iran. And the purpose was to investigate the effects of student-made podcasts versus web-based podcasts on the EFL learner speaking skills. So the hypothesis was basically that those that produced their own podcasts would outperform the ones who downloaded the podcast from the web in terms of their speaking skills. So what actually happened? Well, the learners in the student-made podcast group improved on their speaking skills more, basically, compared to the other groups. So who were these other groups, actually? So we had a control group who was, they had their standard textbook lessons. And then we had another group who was using podcasts, that they were using them in kind of a flipped classroom type of manner. So the teachers would assign the podcast as a homework, and then they would discuss them in class the next day. And the topics of the podcast were similar to those in the textbook. So in this case, the students who actually were producing the podcast the improving speaking skill. So moving on, our last study that we are going to discuss for today, it was conducted by Phillips as early as about 3 years ago. And the context is the first semester of a bachelor's program called English for Health Professionals, and this was in Austria. Now, the purpose of this investigation was to basically address the gap in knowledge on student-generated podcasts and language learning, and to explore students' perceptions. Here we go again with the perceptions of podcasts as a learning tool. So I thought that the method in this particular study was very interesting and very collaborative, because students first produced a 5-minute podcast in groups of about 3 people on nutrition-related diseases or lifestyle choices. So this tied into, of course, they were health professionals. Then they were required to listen to all of the podcasts from their course and then vote on their favorite 3. And so in the end, the course winners entered a final round where the entire faculty of the health department basically listened, and the other students, they voted for the final winner. So I think that this really speaks to this idea of a community of creation that can really allow students to do their best in the spirit of collaboration and healthy competition. So the data for this study was basically collected through surveys, and they found that overall the participants found the production of podcasts to be a really effective learning tool in this case. A particular study gave you guys an idea of how to implement podcasts in a language learning environment. But shortly, I'm also going to offer my suggestions for some potential projects. But before I do that, of course, we're going to go ahead with our last poll for this presentation. Okay, so this one, I'm going to go ahead and launch, is about student production. So, okay, I know that one attendee already said that they had their students produce a podcast before, which is really great. Okay, great. A couple more people are joining. Okay, joining in the yes group. Okay, fabulous. All right, so while people are voting, I'll just take a look at the chat, see if there's anything I missed. Okay, no, not yet. Okay, great. All right. So most of you have voted. Just I'll give you guys a couple more moments to go ahead and vote. And also, I meant to ask you guys this question with the previous poll, but yeah, I didn't remember to do that. So with this poll, I mean, if you have, so one of you guys already told me the context of the project that you had your students work on. But those of you who have said yes in the chat, if you could just briefly say, like, maybe what was the theme of the project that you guys worked on. If anyone who has said yes can tell me that information in the chat, if you would like to, that would be very nice. Okay. Oh, okay. So Flipgrid. Okay. So Flipgrid, this is, yeah, a video. I know that this is video. I don't know that they have like an audio, a podcast component. I don't know. But I know Flipgrid, I'm very fond of Flipgrid actually, for videos, for having the students to produce their own videos. Okay. All right. Okay. So 85% of you have voted. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll for now and share the results. So there were basically 3 of you who have actually had their students produce podcasts, all right, and the rest of you, no. Okay, all right, so I'm hoping that perhaps, again, through the information that you will get in this presentation, perhaps you will be motivated to take this on. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna go ahead now and present you with some of my ideas for podcast creation with your students. Okay, all right. So I'm going to basically introduce the project ideas in 3 areas. So academic English, business English, and then general English. Okay, so as far as academic English, producing a news show might be very interesting. So something like having a local news segment, international news, weather, finance, features where they are interviewing fellow students or native speakers. And of course, students can focus on maybe one component, or they can combine all of these components on one newscast, on one podcast, basically depending on whether or not the length, I'm sorry, depending on the length of the podcast that you decide to assign. Okay, and going just a bit further, business English projects, maybe some company deep dives, some social, maybe talking about the social impact that some companies have, environmental initiatives they have, the net worth of some companies, maybe discussing lawsuits impacting corporate laws, discussing some startup companies, or even talking about emerging industries, so where you can find the best new jobs on the market. Those would all be very interesting, I think, business English project ideas. And finally, general English project ideas. So some topic-based talks like introductions, past achievements or challenges, future plans, maybe practicing a specific grammar point, things like that. And please keep in mind that although I've separated these into these 3 categories, that doesn't really mean that I mean, basically some of these can obviously cross over into academic and into business English as well. Okay, so those are just some of my ideas, and hopefully you found some of those ideas to be helpful. Okay, so let me just look at the chat really briefly again to see what's going on there. Oh, okay. So Professor Juan, okay, so he says that his students produced a Mother's Day podcast, okay, last week. That is really wonderful. Okay, since they couldn't do, okay, a Mother's Day show. Okay, all right, that's really great, really a great idea for that. Okay, so it was more of a video, okay, that was put together. Very nice. All right, so just to tell you guys now about Anchor FM. All right, so it is a free podcasting service. All right, so you don't have to spend any money with this. Okay, it allows you to record a solo podcast using your mobile phone or laptop, record a podcast with a guest who may not have the app. So this is also excellent. So not everyone that you want to appear on the podcast has to actually have an app, and an invite link will be sent. You can publish and distribute your podcast to various platforms. You could upload some cover art, add music and sound effects, trim and split audio. So basically this is, I'm going to show you guys a video on how to do all of that stuff. Okay. All right. So let's go on then. Okay, so hi everybody. Welcome to this video on how to record a podcast using Anchor on your iPhone. So of course the first thing you're going to want to do is to go to the App Store, and I've already searched for Anchor FM, and you're going to want to go ahead and download that onto your phone. So I already have it. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the Anchor app. All right, so this is what it will look like, and you want to go ahead and log in. All right, and so I already have an account here, so I am going to go ahead and sign in. And we're going to go ahead and get started with looking at some of the things that are available. No, I don't want any notifications about my podcast. So here on this screen, you are seeing a test interview episode that I have already recorded with one of my students, and you will get a chance to hear that a little bit later. But for now, let's take a look at the tools we have here. So first, we have voice messages, and what that does is it enables other students to comment, or other listeners to comment on your podcast. Then, of course, we have record, and here you can either just begin recording your own individual podcast, or you can click on the invite friends to join, and once you do that, let's go ahead and give that a try. You can go ahead. I don't know, for some reason the audio went out a little bit here, but basically you can invite your friends via message, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp. So you can use any of these to invite your the people who you would like to join you on the podcast, or the students can do this. You don't have to have Anchor downloaded as an app to join you in a conversation. You could just invite them, they click on the link, and then they can join your conversation, which is something I think is really great. So moving on, we have the library. Now I've done a number of different test recordings, etc. So this basically just saves anything that you have recorded. And let's move on to interludes, or background music that you might want to add to your episodes. And then we have sounds, so different sound effects. And finally, we have songs. So you are able to access some music, maybe from Spotify here, if you would like to add music to your podcast. All right, so let's go ahead to your episode. Let's go ahead and just do a sample recording. Okay, so I hit record. All right, so welcome to our class podcast on Anchor. Let's practice our English with podcasting. Okay, so that's enough just to get a taste of recording. And then let's say that there's something that I don't like in that recording. I can hit the trim button here, which will then change the screen. You can press play to preview. Okay. And then let's say there's a section here that you don't like. Okay, you could change that. You can press the start button, slide it. Let's say you want to start there. Okay, so that will be your new start point. And let's say there's a lot of extra noise in the background and you want to just go ahead and end that there. All right, and then you can press save. Okay, you can press save. And if you would like to additionally add some background music, you can of course do that. Let's say we want to have something a little fun, maybe this, we can preview it a little bit. Now, for some reason, step in, step out. This is a little bit low, this music here. When you let's say you liked actually press it on your phone, okay, you will be able to hear the previews of the or maybe music. You didn't like it, so you want to try a couple others. Let's say at the end of the day, I want something cheerful, so I'll go with the Big 10. So you can listen to that a little bit. You can add that to the episode. You'll see the Big 10. You can press save. So there you go. We can say, we can call this a test class podcast. And we're going to add that to an episode. All right. No, we're not ready. So let's say we want to add something additional to this particular podcast. So you could see that podcast episode. You could see that the little musical note has shown up in the very top corner there. So there you have it. All right, now let's say that I want to add something else to this. Maybe I want to edit the background music, or I want to maybe trim it a little bit more, or I want to edit the audio in some kind of way. I can do all of those things here. Okay, and let's say that I would like to preview my episode. I could do that as well. Again, this is a little low, but... All right, so let's say that I like that. That's totally fine. Okay, I think that everything sounds really nice. Okay, no, we're not going to share it. Okay, but the next thing that we're going to do... is to, let's say we want to add something to this. Okay, so we can go into tools again, and maybe we want to add a sound or something like this. So let's say we want to add the bling sound. Okay, we can add this sound to the episode. In addition, if we want to add like a little bit of an outro, we could do that as well. So I could click on record and say, all right, so thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Join us next week where we will practice the use of the present perfect. Okay, so, okay, let's say we want to save that, and we're going to add recording to the episode. We can name it if we want. We can say something like outro. Okay, outro. All right, good. Okay, so now maybe we want to reorder this a bit, and we can go ahead and let's say we want the bling to go at the end of the outro, for example. We can move that down, we can save it, and then we can preview the entire episode. Okay, so suppose I like that. That's great to me. I can hit the publish button. I can give the episode a title. I can write a description. and it's all pretty user friendly from there. Okay. All right. There's just a little bit more that I wanted to show you guys with regards to this. So that will be this next video. Okay, so suppose there's something that I didn't like, and there is something that I didn't like. Maybe there were a few too many breaths in between something that you were saying. So you can you can press on the little three dots here, and you can edit the audio. So before I showed you trimming the audio, and now I'm going to show you editing the audio. So I've already played this, and I already know that I really want to trim it right about there because there's like an extra breath there. So I'm going to say split. And then I would like to go ahead and change it on the other end as well. So let's say I want it to start up again there. I can hit split. Okay, and then I can save this. So now the only thing about Anchor is that this is really not the best if you want to do a whole lot of splicing. So that's something that the students should definitely be aware of. So, I mean, now that you have these parts, it could be a little bit difficult. So, I think that it's actually the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this from the episode. And then I am going to delete the 7-second. That was the original one. And now, I think it's going to be all set, in terms of this podcast. So let's say I want to, this podcast episode, let's say I want to go ahead and publish. This is something that I did not show you guys on the previous video. So here, I don't want this particular picture. Let's say I can either take a photo or I can choose another photo to change this particular episode. So actually, when you are getting started, this is, I've already done a couple test episodes within this for another podcast I'm doing. So that's why that picture is actually there as my cover art for the general podcast. But you are more than welcome to change the art for each individual episode if you want to do that, if you're a student, and you want to do that. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and first let's check the chat. Okay, I don't see any action going on there at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and play. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and play the finished product of all of that splicing that I was doing. All right, so welcome to our class podcast on Anchor. Let's practice our English with podcasting. All right, so thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Join us next week where we will practice the use of the present perfect. Okay, so yeah, I mean the audio was was pretty decent there, I think. But you guys can give me your opinion about that in the chat. Now I'm going to play just a couple of minutes of a test interview that I did with one of my students. Okay, but before I do that, let's see. We have a comment. Okay, in the chat. It's great. Okay, great. Yes. Okay, definitely. I agree. For free. Yes, exactly. Okay, great. So let me go ahead and play just a couple minutes of this interview with my student. All right. So, welcome to today's podcast. Today we have Roman with us. And Roman, I don't really know what your last name is, or I don't remember your last name. So what is your last name, Roman?
My last name is Garbuzov. Like
Garbuz.
my email address is Roman Garbuzov.
Okay, Garbuzo. All right.
Yeah.
So, Roman, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background. So, where are you from exactly? And then tell us a little bit about your English learning background.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now I live in Moscow, but I was born in Bryansk. It is a pretty small city in central Russia, and um, I had my first English classes at school when I was there in Bryansk. Uh,
Okay, so did you start in elementary school or middle school or what?
I think I started in middle school.
Okay, so when we say middle school, it's like maybe age 11 or so to
Um,
age 14, or it could be like maybe age 10 to
I
14
was
or
about 10 or 11.
okay, all right. So yeah, maybe that could be kind of about middle school.
Yeah,
Okay.
it
Mm-hmm.
was sixth class
Okay. All right,
this year.
great. And and then from there, how did your English learning evolve from there? How did it develop from there?
Um, I didn't pay attention to English at school. Yes,
Okay.
sometimes, yeah, I even sometimes didn't do homework. So yeah, but then I continued to study English at university, and there I was more serious about it.
Okay. All right. So hopefully that gave you just a little bit of the flavor of what's possible with this app. Okay, yes. So we listened to that. Great. So I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like when you invite someone to join you on your podcast, or when the students would invite someone. So if the person has the app, this is what the invitation would look like. And if they do not have the app, then it would just pull up this link for them to go ahead and click and join. Okay, so I also created maybe it's like a 7-minute video or so on the desktop version of Anchor, because doing that little splicing and stuff on your mobile phone, maybe it would be easier on a bigger screen. And so, you can definitely do that on your laptop as well. So, you could see about that with this video. So, I will maybe link that in the chat after this, when I'm out of this presentation mode. So now here are some resources here for you guys. And I'll try to do that as well when I get out of this mode, try to put some of these links in the chat for you guys. But they're basically tutorials on YouTube. Yeah, the first few, these are tutorials. And then this New York Times article, I think is really great. It provides like step-by-step kind of methodology of how to get your students to create a podcast. And then just one of the articles that I read when researching for this shares a lot of ways that teachers use podcasts. That PDF basically shares that information. Okay, and then just the articles that I've read with regards to this topic. And thank you guys so much for joining me on this webinar today. And now I will take any comments or questions you have. So I'm going to get out of this share. Okay. All right. So let's see. Okay, so does anyone have questions? What I'm going to try to do at this particular moment is actually go back into my presentation and see if I can, I'll grab some of these, some of the resources, some of the links, and put those into the chat. I'm going to see if I could go ahead and do that. Okay. All right. Yes. And thank you, Renee, for joining. Okay. Thanks. All right. So, whoops. Okay. So I was trying to share this with everyone. All right. All right. So in the chat, you have all of the links there that I was talking about. I think the link to the video for the desktop, I'm going to copy that now and go ahead and put in the chat for you guys. Okay. All right, great. Oh, whoops, to everyone. Okay. Okay. All right, so we have, let's take a look. Will the slides video be available on the website? Yes, definitely. I am recording this, so it will definitely be made available for anyone who visits our website or our YouTube channel and wants to take a look at this again or at a later time. Okay. All right. So, okay, yes. Thank you guys again. So if there are no other questions, I see that slowly but surely our participants are going on their way. But thank you for lasting here with me today, and I hope that you have found some of this information helpful. Okay. Yeah, so we have a couple more minutes. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves or, wants to say anything, you can feel free to do that in the last couple of minutes, or else I will go ahead and end the meeting. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you guys for your comments in the chat. That's really great. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys. Okay, very nice. Very nice. Okay. All right, let me just make sure I didn't miss anybody's questions or anything like that. If I did, please say something. I think, okay, yeah, good. I think we're all set. Okay. All right, so thank you guys so much again, and please enjoy the rest of this afternoon, and I will see you guys probably joining people in other webinars with New York State TESOL. I think next week is the last week, and then we have a summer break, so okay. All right, thank you, and bye-bye, everybody.